Hello everyone and welcome to this month's edition of the National RENC. I'm Shanoa Grove and I'm actually joined this month with my husband, Phill Grove.
Howdy.
And we're going to just talk a little bit about real estate investing, what's working right now in today's market, and how some of the recent deals that we've been doing and are working on, how you can use those in your own repertoire of real estate investing, and how having a lot of different ways to find deals and figure out how to disposition deals and make money off of deals are working right now in the market at the end of 2013, the beginning of 2014. So Phill, why don't you, for everyone who does not know Phill, do you want to tell a little bit about some of your experience and how you came to sit here on this couch with me today?
Well, probably most of the people have heard of me, but obviously I'm Phill Grove. I'm not usually on this particular channel and show that Shanoa usually hosts and interviews other people, but I'm the guest host this month. I've been a real estate investor for almost 10 years. In fact, my 10-year anniversary as a real estate investor comes up in just 1 week. So 1 week from now, I will be a real estate investor for 10 years. I think my claim to fame is it took me 6 months to find my first deal, but within 5 years, I've been involved in negotiating over 1,000 different transactions. So once I got going, I got pretty good at it. And I'm probably best known for just finding always a way to make money on every situation. I use and I teach all 12 real estate investing strategies, which means every single time somebody calls me that might want to sell a house, I always have an offer that I make them, whether they're motivated, unmotivated, have equity, no equity, underwater, owned it free and clear, whatever the situation is, there's always a way you can make money if somebody wants to sell a house. And if you know all the ways to make money when somebody wants to sell a house, you're going to do the best job at monetizing your marketing, making money off of the leads that you get, which ultimately means you'll be able to afford more leads than anybody else, and you'll be able to put everybody else out of business.
Phill, you said something interesting right at the end there that I want to explore a little bit more. And your coaches have taught you this strategy, and you've taught it to me and several other investors that you work with. And that is the figuring out how much you can spend on a lead. Can you sort of explain that in a way for both the new investors and the experienced investors to understand, to see how they could sort of use that strategy and that marketing philosophy in their own business?
Well, I'll take a shot at it. I mean, real estate investing, like frankly all other businesses, is a numbers game, and the number starts with marketing. You spend money to generate leads. Real estate leads are simply names and phone numbers of people that might want to sell their house, and then you call them and you try to monetize those leads, make money off of those leads by offering them to buy their house, fix, flip, assign, refer the deal out to somebody else, whatever it happens to be. Leads are expensive. I found that when I pay for leads for using strategies like direct mail, for example, on average, ballpark costs me about $100 to get a qualified motivated seller lead. And about 1 out of every 20 leads that I get makes me a deal that makes me on average about $15,000. Took me a couple of years to figure that out. But once I did figure that out, I started to think about this business in a very different way. I started to realize this whole business is nothing but a numbers game, and I know the numbers. And the numbers are, every time I spend $1,000 on direct mail, I make $15,000 on profit. That's pretty cool. So once you start thinking about the business that way, it's just a different way to think. Once I realized that, for example, a lead costs me on average $100 if I'm doing direct mail, when the phone starts ringing, and I realized, man, this is a $100 phone call I'm about to take. If there's a way to make money on this phone call, I better find a way to make money on this phone call. And that's why I developed all these different strategies to make money every time the phone rings, because I want to be able to make money every time the phone rings, because those are expensive phone calls. You have to see it that way. At the end of the day, though, marketing leads are competitive as well. You're competing with other real estate investors to get leads. So for example, you're putting ads in the newspaper, or you're putting ads on the internet, or you're sending out direct mail. How much can you afford to spend on your marketing? Well, obviously, the more you spend, the more leads that you're going to get. Whoever gets the most money per lead will ultimately be able to afford to buy the most leads, and that's why that's the person that puts everybody else out of business. So your job is to do the very best you can at monetizing your marketing. In other words, make money using every strategy imaginable on every lead that you get, so that you can afford ultimately to get more leads than anybody else.
So Phill, one of the exercises that we go through when we do our live event is something called Name That Deal. And just for those of you who are listening who have not been to a live event with Phill and I before, essentially Name That Deal, I walk around and I let the phone ring. Ring, 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 until one brave soul, one of the investors in the room actually picks it up and says, hey, thanks for calling We Buy Houses. How may I help you? And it's heartbreaking to me sometimes as we go through, and I play the seller and the investor and the audience plays obviously the investor. It's heartbreaking to me sometimes how quickly they get off the phone because they feel like this is not a deal. And every investor, including me, including you, we're all looking for that silver bullet deal. We're always looking for that, that one big prize. And what that one big prize is a fix and flip, right? Because as an investor, your best way to make the most amount of money is by doing a fix and flip. And once sometimes,
but those are really one of the hardest deals to find.
I agree, but as we go through this exercise live in class, and you've seen it happen, when people realize, well, gosh, this isn't a fix and flip candidate, as the seller, I'm not a fix and flip candidate, then they're in a huge hurry to get off the phone with me, not taking the time to figure out, well, number one, I spent $200 to make this phone ring. And number two, now that I've spent $200 to make this phone ring, I'm not going to hang up on this call without figuring out how to make money off of it. So I watch when we do this exercise, Name That Deal. We also sometimes call it Who Wants to Be a Phillionaire, because we give lifelines and stuff like that. But I watch people burn $200 every time that we do this.
Yeah.
And some of the strategies that you use, that we use together, help investors find ways to make money off the deals that are not, when you initially think about it and do the math, isn't a deal that's not a deal.
My favorite stories are stories I could tell deal after deal. I'd probably tell a few right now. Deal after deal about money I've made on leads that other people have thrown away.
Right.
I'll think of one. We bought 6 houses once from a guy who had an absolute throwaway deal. So somebody called, and this guy owns 6 rental properties. I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's just say they're all worth about $150,000 each. And on each one of these houses, he owes anywhere from $150 to maybe even $155 or $160. In other words, there's no equity at all in any of these houses. And the guy has a good job. He's motivated though because he hates being a landlord. He just got talked into buying a bunch of rental properties, and then he hates it. There's no equity in them. They didn't go up in value. He's not getting any cash flow out of them. And he desperately just wants to dump all these houses. So what do you do with a guy who's got a bunch of houses that have no equity? Well, the first thing he does is he calls a realtor, and the realtor says, well, you're going to have to bring $20,000 to the table for each one of these houses to pay closing costs, real estate commissions, and negative equity. That's going to come to $120,000 just to sell these houses. And of course the guy's like, what, are you kidding? I'm not going to do that. And then he called 10 different investors, and all 10 investors say, you got no equity, there's nothing I can do. And they hung up on the phone because they're all looking for a fix and flip. Right. They're all looking to get the thing at 70% on the dollar. Right. None of these houses had that much equity in them. They were more common leads than the fix and flip leads. And then he calls me. And I'm looking at this guy's situation, and I said, well, you've got a good job, you have money, you don't want to bring $120,000 to the table. I get that. I'll tell you what I'll do. If you write me a check for $50,000, I will take over all 6 loans for you. So basically, I got the guy to give me all 6 houses absolutely for free, and he paid me, wrote me a check for $50,000 in order to take them, which for him was a good deal because it was less than half of what the realtors told him he was going to have to pay. Okay, so now I own 6 houses and I got $50,000 in my pocket. What's the next strategy? The next strategy is sell the houses with seller financing. Well, guess who I sold the houses to? Well, guess what? These were all rental properties. There were already people living in those houses. So I went to each one of the tenants and I said, tell you what, if you're tired of being a tenant, if you give me $10,000 down, I will sell this house to you and provide financing for you. Which financing? The financing that I got with the house. So I made another $10,000 per house. Now only 4 of the 6 tenants took me up on the deal because a couple of them said they didn't have the money. So we just waited for those leases to expire, and then eventually we sold those as well. But there's a perfect example of turning, lemons into lemonade, making a tremendous amount of money off of a lead that 10 other investors had just walked away with. We see that kind of a situation again and again and again. Sometimes I tell about my first big deal, the Glass Mountain story. I flipped a house and I made almost $300,000 flipping a house. But the interesting thing, and the more interesting part of the story, is that 7 other investors looked at that house before I did. And 7 other investors walked in and walked out without getting it under contract. Why? Because those 7 investors, like 99% of the investors that are out there, were all a bunch of one-trick ponies. They were just looking for some fix and flip deal. This house was more complicated than that. It needed renovation. The renovation had half started. The homeowner was in bankruptcy. The house was underwater in terms of all the debts and liens on it. So it needed a combination of strategies in order to get the deal bought and sold. But I ended up buying the house by solving the seller's problems and doing another deal in that example that several other investors had walked away with from. But I didn't, because I was willing to just solve the problem using whatever strategies solved the problem.
I see a lot of investors who are looking for that 70% of ARV, 70% of ARV minus repairs deal, and we're looking for that deal all the time, every single day too.
And I'm looking at it probably harder than you are, because I can afford to spend more money on more marketing and get more leads, so I'm more likely to find that deal. But that being said, the reason I'm more likely to find that deal is because I'm doing more marketing. The reason I can afford to do more marketing is because I'm doing a better job of making money on all the leads that my competition doesn't make money on.
Right. So those are the deals we're looking for. Those 70% deals. Those deals that we first got started as a real estate investor to find. And a lot of investors that I see that are just on track to find those deals, they cannot afford to be a real estate investor because there are not enough of those to go around, and or they make mistakes. Sometimes calculated, sometimes not calculated, meaning they'll overpay for a property in order just to get that next deal. We don't want to see you guys in that situation where you're either overpaying to get a property and maybe losing money ultimately on it, or that you're throwing away leads that you get because you don't know how to monetize them, or you're just kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting for that perfect deal to land in your lap.
Well,
and the truth is, those perfect deals don't come along as much as we would like them to. So having those strategies, and having those strategies that are integrated into the rest of your platform and the rest of your offers and your knowledge is really critical in order to have a successful real estate business that can grow and thrive in any market condition.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that people overpay for properties is because they're gamblers. They're not doing enough marketing. They only have
motivated buyers.
Yeah, they become motivated buyers. They don't have enough good leads, so they have to take a chance on the best thing that came across their desk. And if you only have a limited number of opportunities and you need to make money, you take the best of the worst opportunities that you get, and you end up becoming more of a gambler than a real estate investor. People that are doing massive amounts of marketing aren't gamblers, because they get to cherry pick the better deals.
Yeah, we cherry pick a lot of our deals, and we wholesale a lot of our deals, and we use this AMPS system that Phil's kind of been describing here for a lot of our deals as well, just because they don't always fit the mold. And in this market, there's competition from hedge funds, there's competition from other investors. Sellers maybe just don't have enough money, don't have enough equity to be able to accept your deal. You've got to be able to complement some of these, that one trick pony strategy with some of these other strategies, so that you can keep the lights on. Do we want you to still go out and look for those 70% of ARV minus repairs deals? Yes, we want you to find those deals every single day. But when your marketing brings in something different, having the knowledge and having the know-how and having the ability to monetize a lead like that is really the difference between you being a broke investor or you being a successful investor in any market.
Well, by the way, I mean, when you say we want you to be looking for those 70% deals, of course, everybody needs to look for those 70% deals. But for every 70% deal, guess what? There's 10 80% deals. For every 80% deal, there's 10 90% deals. For every 90% deal, there's probably 100 100% deals. In other words, no equity deals. No equity deals are the most common leads that you get. You're going to get those people that call you day and night, no matter what marketing you do. You'd better know how to make money on those calls. Not only being able to flip and seller finance and use what we call these AMP strategy. AMPs, we didn't really explain that. Assignment and mortgage payment system. It's a subject to wholesaling or seller financing strategy that's really effective right now on those low, little, no, or negative equity leads because of the lending situation that's going on right now. You've got to know these strategies to be able to make money on those deals. But you also have to know these strategies in order to build wealth. Not only should you be building income, we all need income, flipping houses to make money, etc. But you should also be building wealth. Wealth means you should be collecting rental properties. Rental properties, the right properties in the right locations, because 10 years from now, you're going to look at your bottom line, income minus liabilities, what's my net worth? You're not going to remember the $5,000 you made on this deal or even the $50,000 you made on that deal 10 years from now. 10 years from now, you're going to say, what is my net worth? And your net worth will be determined more by rental properties,
your
by
assets,
the accumulated wealth you've accumulated in the 10 years than by flipping. So we need to flip short term to generate income, to pay for our lifestyle. Over long term, we need to build wealth by accumulating rental properties, right properties in the right location. And the best way to accumulate rental properties is to accumulate them with other people's debt. In other words, by taking over mortgage payments on houses that are owned by people that don't want them anymore. And you can get, once you learn how to buy houses with no money and no credit, which is what AMPS is all about. How many houses can you afford to buy once you can learn how to buy houses with no money and no credit? And the answer is, all of them. That's how you get rich.
One of the things, Phill, that a lot of your students have said about you is that you tell the truth and the whole truth, right? Mm-hmm. So you tell the good and the bad of investing. A lot of other people who talk about real estate, who talk about investing, talk about how great it is to find those fix and flip deals, talk about how you can have an entire business off of that, and you can if you're doing a lot of marketing. But Phill, you're the only one who's really introduced this idea of you cannot just be a one-trick pony. You're the only one who's really introduced this idea of you've got to have some of these other strategies to help people, whether they have 100% equity or whether they have no equity at all.
Well, the reason I believe I'm the only one that tells quote unquote the truth about all the different investing strategies, because I'm the only one that teaches all of the strategies. I am strategically agnostic. I don't have some vested interest in trying to convince you should do seller financing, or you should do fix and flip, or you should do short sales, or you should do wraps, or you should do house swapping. My answer is, which one should you do? Yes, you should do them all. Your job is to just get people that might want to sell their house to call you and use whatever strategy helps them solve their problem and helps you make your money. So when I teach this stuff, I will teach you what's wrong with all of these strategies as well as what's right with all of these strategies, because all of these strategies work. They all are solutions to different problems. They all have good sides and they all have bad sides to them.
Talk about, if you don't mind, one of our rental properties, Garden Villa, for example.
Okay.
Explain to them how we found it, how we negotiated it, how we bought it, and what our ultimate exit strategy is. Okay. Just to kind of give people
that's the IRA property.
Yeah,
it's one of the IRA
just to give people another viewpoint of investing.
Well, an interesting property. Let me see if I remember all the details. This was a situation where mom and dad passed away and left their son a property. Unfortunately, the son was, I believe, an alcoholic. I don't know exactly, but there were
I think one room was the flooring was bottle caps. Okay. So anyway, you're being very nice.
Yeah. so there were the son inherited a very nice home in a nice neighborhood, although there was a lot of deferred maintenance and probably had some dependency issues, and basically borrowed as much money as the banks would lend him in the form of a home equity loan, and kind of spent his way through all that money. His home equity loan became his inheritance, and eventually he couldn't afford to pay his mortgage payment or his taxes anymore, so he was facing foreclosure. Now the property's worth, at the time it was probably worth $200,000, and he only owed maybe $80,000 on that property. So we made, but there was a fair amount of deferred maintenance on the property. So we basically made him a deal, and we said, hey, we'll give you $20,000 if you deed the property over to us. And we actually bought that property using our IRA, our self-directed IRA. Not all people are familiar with the fact that you can buy rental properties with your IRA. We actually bought a rental property with our IRA. So our IRA basically gave this guy $20,000, and then our IRA got this house with the financing of about $80,000, and we turned it into a rental property that to this day our IRA still owns. So every month our IRA collects the rent, and every month our IRA pays the mortgage. And that property by now is worth, how much would you say? You're my realtor. How much is it worth?
$250 to $280.
$250 to $280. So for $20,000 of our IRA, we have a property that's worth about $250, $280. We owe about $80, probably a little less than that. So we got about $200,000 of equity. Now, our exit strategy for that property is just let it ride. In other words, it's just on the shelf as one of our rental properties owned by our IRA. We're going to let it ride for the next 20 years. In 20 years, that thing will be worth at least $500,000. The loan will be paid off, so we'll own it free and clear. So our IRA will basically have turned $20,000 into $500,000. And because it's a self-directed Roth IRA, when we sell that property 20 years from now, it will be $500,000 tax-free. I don't know about you, but that's about as good as it gets when you can turn $20,000 of an IRA into $500,000 of tax-free retirement dollars. And we have many of those deals. That's just one example of one deal. That was a deal that took a fair amount of cash, $20,000 out of our IRA. Most of the properties that we buy using AMPS or with our IRA take as little as $1,000 or a couple $1,000, rarely more than maybe $5,000. So that was a low or a high cash amount example. One of our Big Dog students just recently, they're in the process of doing a deal where they're buying a property for $5,000 down, and they're holding it for 12 years. There's 12 years left on the loan. 12 years they'll own the property free and clear. Now the property today is worth almost $300,000. In 5 years it'll be worth, probably more than that, but let's just say, I don't know, $400,000. They will have turned, $5,000 into $400,000 using the AMP strategy. So wealth is a key component to real estate investing, and AMPS is great for making money, flipping and seller financing deals, but it's also great for accumulating wealth. That's what's more exciting to me, is the long-term wealth.
So you've just given some examples of houses with a fair amount of equity in them. Mm-hmm. Give some examples too of finding an unsellable house and connecting that unsellable house with an unloanable buyer.
Okay. Well, the example I gave before where I said this guy called me with the six houses was an example of that. But the most common lead you'll get in the entire universe, you just, no matter what marketing you do, send out letters, postcards, bandit signs, whatever you do, you'll get people that are broke with little, no, or negative equity. So somebody has a house and it's worth $150 and they owe $150. Maybe they owe $160, maybe they owe $140, maybe they owe $170. These are broke, motivated sellers with little, no, or negative equity who need to sell their house, and they literally can't afford to sell their house. What we do with those houses is we simply tell the seller, hey, we will either take over the payments on your mortgage or find somebody to take over the payments on your mortgage. And they say, ooh, great, that's the solution to my problem. Awesome, an alternative to foreclosure that doesn't cost me any money, it doesn't hurt my credit, that's fantastic. Where do I sign up? And then we take that property and we assign the mortgage payment. We basically seller finance it to somebody who can't get a loan. Well, guess what? There's 82.5 million people right now that can't get mortgages under the current lending standards. 5 years ago, if you wanted to get a loan, you walked into a bank, they held a mirror under your nose. If they saw fog, you got a loan. That was the loan application process. 5 years later, if you want to get a loan, it's a whole different set of rules. And there's 82.5 million people that are left out in the cold when it comes to getting a loan. But that's okay. A lot of them want to buy houses, and they can buy houses as long as they get houses with financing. So the AMP strategy is just a way of taking a loan from somebody who has a loan that they desperately don't want anymore, and frankly probably should have never been given, and giving that loan to somebody who desperately wants a loan and can't get it anywhere else.
You know what I love about the AMP strategy too is, you remember recently we took out some of our big dog students, some of our coaching students out on a shadowing session, where sometimes they'll come with us to a property that we're either negotiating, have recently purchased, or in the process of renovating. And we took some of our students out to a property in Del Valley. And it was an AMP deal. It was a house with no equity that we were selling to a buyer who had a down payment, which was going to go to us for facilitating the transaction, who liked the house, who liked the neighborhood, who liked, more importantly, the terms, meaning the monthly payment on the loan. And that's how we were selling this property with no equity in it. And what was funny about it is, and I don't know if you remember this while we were there, but some of our students asked the question, well, Shanoa, you know, you're the numbers person, right? So what's the ARV? You know, what are the repairs? You know, what do you offer on this property? And it's funny because I kind of looked at Phill, and Phill kind of looked back at me, and it's like, we have no idea. We don't care.
Matter.
It doesn't matter. AMP's deals are the easiest to evaluate deals out there. A lot of people get hung up in doing the math, figuring out how much to offer. With an AMP deal, it couldn't be easier. You just offer whatever they owe on the loan, and that's kind of a fun thing about it. It doesn't matter as long as they have good terms on their note.
Right. There's no inspections. There's no loan approval process. There's no loan application process. There's no underwriting. There's no appraisals. I mean, all the things that can torpedo, right? Yeah. Make traditional real estate complex are not relevant in a no equity AMP deal.
Right.
Yeah. Now, I would not have bought that particular property as a rental property,
right? We would not have
because it doesn't fit our rental property criteria, but it's perfect for doing a seller finance deal.
A retail buyer who needs seller financing, it was a great deal.
Yeah.
And we've talked to some other investors. I remember some investors who've given me like an entire booklet of, here's all the analysis on this property I'm going to do an AMP deal on. And for me, all I need to know is, well, how much do they owe? Well, what are the monthly payments? Well, can you find a buyer who will come in and give you $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 and then just take over those payments? Right. It's the coolest and simplest, and you know, from an analysis and setup standpoint in the world.
If you sell a property with seller financing, there's two things I can guarantee. It will sell faster and it will sell for a premium price. On average, remember how common it is to find these sellers. On average, we find 14 buyers for every one seller. On our online platform, the REI Matcher that we use to match up buyers and sellers, there's thousands of buyers on there at any one time. I mean, it's just so easy to find the buyers. The harder thing to find is the sellers, and the sellers are the most common sellers you will find of all the different types of deals that you're looking for, because AMPs it's kind of like short sales, just broke, motivated sellers with little or negative equity. The same people you could do a short sale with, but AMPs is actually a better alternative to most people than a short sale, because a short sale hurts your credit and AMPs does not hurt your credit.
So can I give one more example of a deal that I talked to one of our big dogs about today?
Okay.
This is actually our big dog, Margaret, and she was working with another investor, and this investor had done a lot of what we were talking about, except took a little bit different spin on it. They had bought this property from a seller for $87,000. They, again, just took over payments, right? Purchased it subject to using these AMP strategies. They sold it to the tenant for $140,000, okay? 140. We're collecting monthly cash flow on the spread every month, the difference between what was owed to the mortgage company every month and the rent, if you will, that was being received from that tenant buyer.
Mortgage payment.
Yes. Yeah. So they took a deal, and the house is not probably worth more than about $110,000 on a good day, but they found a motivated buyer, is actually a tenant buyer, had a bunch of other family in the neighborhood that was like, yeah, this sounds like a deal to me. So what sounds like a deal to you, and what sounds like a deal to you is not maybe the deal, is not maybe what sounds like a deal to a tenant buyer, a retail buyer. So sometimes I have to tell students all the time, you've got to divorce yourself from your current situation and put yourself in the shoes of someone who would say, yeah, I like the payment. I like the payment. It's all about the
Right.
payment, and that sounds like a deal to me.
Yeah.
Where do I sign?
Well, I mean, what most new investors have trouble understanding is that it's like, I wouldn't do that deal.
Right.
Why would somebody else do that deal? What a house is worth depends on the situation. If you have a house that would appraise for, let's say, $100,000, well, a realtor working with a retail buyer would probably buy that house for, I don't know, around $100,000. But on the other hand, if that house sold at the auction, it might sell for $50,000. If that's sold to a cash buyer from a motivated seller, well, it might sell for $70,000. But if that same house sold to a seller finance buyer, to a buyer who's buying it more for the loan than for the property, that might sell for $120,000. So what a house is worth in that one example could be anywhere from $50,000 to $120,000, depending on the circumstance. But one thing for sure, if you sell a house with seller financing, whenever you provide financing with a house, it will always sell faster, and it will always sell for a premium price. 10, 20, up to 30% premium price is typical if you're providing the financing with the property.
So for me, what I love about real estate investing is, number one, every day I get to learn something different. And some of these different strategies, how to make money off of these throwaway deals, they excite me more than anything else, because then I've got a great story to tell. I hope we've piqued your interest in going through some of these different stories of our personal stories, our personal student stories. And Phill, do you want to tell them how they can maybe learn a little bit more about using some of the strategies?
We actually recorded a whole video. I recorded a whole video about the AMPS strategy, is something we wanted to teach you this month. Anybody that doesn't know AMPS, I mean, you're leaving out probably the single most important strategy that there is. I am strategically agnostic. I use all of the different strategies, but if you put a gun to my head and you said, Phill, you're only allowed to keep one, this is the one I would not give up. I would never give up my ability to be able to buy houses with no money and no credit, because that's how I've gotten more rich than using any other strategy that I have. Yeah. So I've created a pretty comprehensive training video, and you can click on it somewhere down below and go ahead and watch the video, and it will teach you how you can start doing AMPS deals as well. We kind of talked at a high level about how these things work, but the training video down below goes into a lot of details, and it'll show you how you can too go ahead and start doing your own AMPS deals and making money on these unsellable houses. We call it selling unsellable houses to unloanable buyers and making $10,000 a pop, or just building your own wealth portfolio. In other words, collecting a bunch of rental properties with no money and no credit, or minimal money and minimal credit, so that you can get wealthy.
One other thing I did not mention is a lot of people have actually studied that program to figure out how to get themselves out of their own unsellable house. We get that a lot. So if you're in a position like that, you can help yourself out of that position. And if you meet a motivated seller like that, which you'll probably meet, half of the leads you get will be leads like that at least. Yeah. You'll be able to have a solution, which is so important in this environment when it's so competitive. Right. And real estate is sort of up and down and on a little bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that they need money to be real estate investors. Like it takes money to make money. The truth is, what you need to invest in is not having more money. You need to invest in yourself. What you really need to be a successful real estate investor is specialized knowledge, because once you learn how to solve problems without money or without credit, then your business becomes infinitely scalable. Okay, that's how you get rich in this business. The more money that I've made as a real estate investor, the less of my own money that I use. It's pretty uncommon when I do a deal, even a fix and flip deal, that I don't negotiate financing with the deal. I always negotiate first with cash, and then I switch it over to financing, even if I have to give the seller a little bit more money. It's just much more scalable. You can do a lot more deals once you learn how to do deals without money or credit. No matter how much money you have, nobody has enough money, all the way up to Donald Trump, to invest or to finance all the deals that they might find with their marketing. But once you learn how to do deals with no money and no credit, you can do as many deals as you want.
So to find out more, just click somewhere below. And again, Phill, thank you for joining us today as part of National RENC Real Estate Networking Club. Thank you for sharing some of these ideas and some of these thoughts, and even thank you for sharing how you're implementing them today in today's market. Even when the market is going up, there are plenty of opportunities like this out there. So it's a great knowledge to have.
Yeah, I mean, seller financing and the AMP strategy is not so much a buyer market strategy or a seller market strategy. It's a lending strategy. It's an alternative form of lending. And once you learn how to essentially get other people's credit to work for you, be the bank, that makes things very, very exciting.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Phill, and thank you for joining us on this episode of National RENC. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.